Hello everybody, Jennifer Maker here. Have you ever tried Print Then Cut on your Cricut, only to watch your Cricut cut in the wrong place? Or maybe it can't read the registration marks at all, even though you swear you did everything right? If that's ever made you wonder, is my machine broken? Or why does this work for everyone else like Jennifer, but not me? Let me reassure you right now, it is not you. I have been using Cricut machines for years, and I've taught millions of crafters. And honestly, Print Then Cut is one of the most common problem areas I see, even for experienced users. Here's the key thing that most people aren't told. Print Then Cut isn't broken, it's sensitive. And once you understand what it's actually looking for, this feature becomes predictable instead of frustrating. So today I'm going to show you why Print Then Cut fails and the simple fixes that make it work the way that it's supposed to so you can have fun crafting. Now I have one special, perhaps controversial fix that I'm going to share at the end of our workshop today too. So hang out for that. If you want to hear it, it's up to you. I'll warn you before I say it. All right, first, why Print Then Cut is different than a typical cut on your Cricut, right? So Print Then Cut isn't like regular cutting. Your Cricut isn't just following a digital file. It's using a sensor to read printed registration marks in the real world. That means it reacts to light, paper finish, shadows, contrast, and your particular environment. So when Print Then Cut goes wrong, it's usually not a settings issue, it's an environment issue. And once you understand that, troubleshooting becomes much calmer and I think much faster. So let me show you where the sensor is so that you even understand that part. Okay, so I've got a Cricut Maker here. I've also got a Cricut Joy Extra here. I'm going to show you where the sensor is on both of these because these can both do Print Then Cut. The sensor on the Cricut Joy Extra is right under here. I'm going to try to get to it with my, there we go. This is the Cricut Joy Extra sensor. It's right over here. It's this little black dot under here. So that's where it is. And this will become important later because I'm going to talk about that. On the Cricut Maker and the Explorer, there is a little black plastic box right here. You see this? This is actually the cover of the sensor there. And sometimes that actually can fall off and that can be a problem. So if you're having a problem, you should check to see if that is there. But that is where the sensor is on these two machines. The Explorer and the Venture also have a sensor. The original Cricut Joy does not. So you can't do Print Then Cut on the original Cricut Joy, at least not with a sensor the way that we're doing it here. The biggest reason that Print Then Cut fails is lighting. Too much light is just as bad as too much little. Or too much light is just as bad as too little. So bright overhead lights or sunlight from a window or glare bouncing off glossy paper can confuse your sensor, right? And that's why one of the simplest fixes is also one of the most surprising. It is to turn your lights off. I'm going to try doing it right now. So I've got lights on right now. I have a remote for my lights here. Right? So if you have light shining, also right here, see this? This is my Cricut Bright, my Cricut 360 lamp. I can't quite reach it. There we go. Right? A lot of times it is like light, especially light directly on your Cricut, that is causing an issue or it's creating glare. So you want to avoid really bright lights. You want to avoid direct sunlight because it's important that your sensor can focus. I'll turn my lights back on. So by the way, these lights are fine. In fact, even this lamp is fine. I've already done it today. But if you are having problems and turning off lights doesn't help, then I recommend you turn a light on, right? In other words, you need to, your environment might have some wonky lighting and you need to make sure that it's either not too bright and not too dim and you don't have glare. And For those who don't know what I mean when I say glare, I'm going to give you an example. So this is a glossy piece of photo paper. Do you see that like white light that's kind of moving around? That is glare. And if this is on, let's actually, it's bouncing off my overhead lights right now. Do you see how, get it to stay there for me? Right here, right there. Do you see how it is on that sensor line? These are the sensor lines right here, right? If that line is on, if that light, there we go. I feel like I'm playing with lights and a cat. My cat loves lights bouncing off things. He loves glare. All right, so if you have something like this, your Cricut is going to have a problem seeing your lines well. Okay, so if your lights are shining on something like that, and this can happen on matte paper too, if you have a really bright light. So just keep that in mind, right? And again, if turning overhead lights off doesn't do the trick, try using a diffused lamp near your machine. This right here is a diffused lamp. This is the Cricut 360 lamp. It's got a diffuser over it. If you don't have a fancy light with a diffuser, you can just get a piece of wax paper or copy paper to put over your desk lamp to diffuse it. And speaking of light and glare, your sensor can get dirty. And if it gets dirty, like even a little bit of dust, it can cause an issue. It can cause the light to bounce. It can cause it to not be able to pick up on its sensor lines, right? And again, our sensor lines are these black lines here, which are very important, and they look like this. Currently, the center lines do change I've seen them over the 8 years I've been doing Print Then Cut on the Cricut. They've actually changed a fair amount, but that is what they look like right now. And those sensor lines are very important. If your sensor is dirty, it's a problem. So let me show you how to clean your sensor. All right, so first off, you want to turn off your machine. So I'm going to turn off mine. You want to use a dry paintbrush like this, a clean dry paintbrush. And you're just going to come in here where you see your sensor right here and just brush it, get the dust off of it, right? That's all you're going to do. On the Venture, they do recommend using alcohol, like rubbing alcohol, but they don't recommend that on the Explorer and Maker. I don't know why. I don't know that it really matters, but I will say a clean, dry paintbrush is going to be safe. All right, so, and you can do the same thing on your Joy Extra. Let's see if I can give you a better angle of that. All right, so there, you can kind of see, kind of, not quite, but it's, yeah, I'm failing at this. Now it's not even focusing for me, but it's under there. So you would just want to clean that too. And that will make a difference. Now, this is important. When you are done cleaning, I want you to verify that your sensor light comes on when it's scanning. And if it doesn't, if you don't see that sensor light, you do want to contact Cricut, because if the sensor light, which will show up right below your blade assembly as it's scanning, if it doesn't come on, then there's an issue, right? So, but you'll see a little light come on. All right, the next thing that matters if you're having a problem with Print Then Cut is your paper. Print Then Cut works best on matte paper, so non-glossy paper. Things like glossy paper, photo paper, glossy photo paper, laminated sheets, they all can cause glare that makes it harder for your machine to read your registration marks. Now that doesn't mean you can't use glossy materials, but it does mean they require more care. If you are troubleshooting a problem and you're using glossy paper, go test on matte paper first. That way you know if that's the issue, and then you're just changing that one variable, right? If that fixes it, you can still use glossy paper. There's two tips that I have for that. One is to use matte Scotch tape over your registration marks to reduce glare and help your sensor read them. If that still does not work and you feel confident that the issue is your glossy paper, like this. You can print it out from Design Space first on matte paper and then use that as a frame for your glossy paper. You just tape it, you cut it out like I have started cutting it out here, and you can put it over your paper. Let me show you what I mean. So here we have a glossy, right? You can see all the glare on it. Very pretty, but very glary. And then here it doesn't have that same level of glare at all. So you can just, making sure that they are the same, you can use it as a frame, right? So I've just cut out the design, and then we take our glossy paper like this, and then I can just place it over here and tape it down. You just want to make sure that your registration marks line up perfectly between these two, right? And let me give you an example of an issue that a lot of people might not notice. I want you to look at this one. Do you see anything wrong with this one? Those of you who are familiar with Print Then Cut, there is an issue with this one. And it has to do really with the fact that it's glossy. This is like a pretty thick paper. Thick paper doesn't feed as well in printers. It has a tendency to misfeed. And if you look closely, you can see that it is crooked. Now, the Cricut is actually okay at it being a little crooked. What it will struggle with, however, is it being too close to the top. You need to have a 1/2 inch of margin. If you have a misfeed, it's okay if there is at least a 1/2 inch of margin between your sensors and the edge of your paper. And I want you to note here that there is not a 1/2 inch. You see this? It's close, but there isn't quite a 1/2 inch. It's like a little bit less. Also, if I were to take this glossy sheet and try to put my frame on it, these are not the same. They're not going to line up, and it's going to cut it out, but it's going to be crooked. Okay, so just these are things that are important to note. One thing that I've seen a lot of problems with over the years is, I'm going to cut this sheet here as if it really misfed. So we're just going to pretend with me. Okay, so I've seen people, when they printed out their project, it looks like this. And those sensors are really close to the top, maybe even off the page a little bit. If it's a bad misfeed, it might be like that. And you're not used to Print Then Cut, and you don't know that that's a problem. You might think, oh, I see it looks fine. There's my design, it's all there. But in fact, this is not likely to be a successful project. And so it's really important that you have a good sensors with good margin around them. Okay, but you can still, so actually, and this frame trick can work for glossy paper, and it can work for colored paper or dark paper too, which is a big deal because normally you can't use anything really, really dark. Now the Cricut Maker 4 and the Explore 4 can do colored paper, but there's going to be like a limit to how dark it can be, because if you can't see your sensor marks, it's not going to be able to, properly do it. So this is a trick if you need to do that. All right, so okay, I have another tip for you, and that is your print settings. So before you print your design, make sure that your printer settings are following these particular guidelines, okay? You want to print in portrait mode. This is portrait mode, where it's taller than it is wider, okay? You want to make sure that your printer is not low on ink, because if it is, it might not print those sensor marks very well. You want to make sure you don't have narrow margins set on your printer. You want to make sure you're not printing more than 1 page per sheet. You want to absolutely do not want to adjust your page scaling, so no fit to page or anything like that. No edge printing, don't center align. Okay, so these are all settings that might show up in your print settings. The biggest one that I think is an issue, I see that a lot of people say, I have calibrated my Cricut, and your Cricut will prompt you to calibrate. But I've calibrated, it's still off, it's off. I don't get it. What's wrong with my Cricut? Chances are, I would say most of the time that this is happening, it's because when you went to print it, you said fit to page or you scaled it somehow, because sometimes it's the default and you don't know. So watch for that. If you're having a problem, go check your print settings. In fact, we can go look at them right now. All right, so this is our calendar project that is ready to go. And I'm gonna go ahead and click Make It. Let's go ahead and send this to our printer so I can show you the print settings. I'm gonna click on Continue, and then I'm gonna click Send it to Printer. And it's letting me know about the sensor marks, which is useful, especially if this is the first time that you're doing Print Then Cut. I think that Cricut Design Space is doing a better job of teaching how Print Then Cut works. So the sensor marks are added and it's showing you what they look like so you know what to look for. We go ahead and click Next. This is our print setup window. In the print setup window, we choose our printer, right? And our copies, because you can have more than one copy. Go ahead and leave bleed on. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I also want you to turn on Use System Dialog by just clicking on the little toggle right there. And because this gives you access to your print settings so you can check on things. And that's also how you get your best prints too. And then you go ahead and press Print. Now, your print settings will typically show up behind your Cricut Design Space window. So I'm going to just drag this down here so we can see them. And here they are. There is our print dialog box. All right, so I want to go to Print and Media and Quality, and make sure that my quality is set to best. That will give us the best print. And then also, let's take a look at layout. I'm just opening this up, this little arrow here. We want to make sure it's one sheet per page, not two, not four. We want to make sure that we don't want any of these things to really be anything other than basic, okay? Paper handling, all of this is okay. Okay, scale to fit paper size. We would not want this turned on. We don't want that turned on. So make sure, this is like the big one. Make sure scale to fit or scaling down, neither of those two there. Okay. All right, and now I am going to go ahead and print. So those are your print settings. So pay attention to your print settings. Now you saw in my print settings something about bleed, right? Let's talk about bleed because I think bleed confuses a lot of people. When bleed is turned on in Cricut Design Space, which is typically by default, your printed image may look fuzzy around the edges, and this may alarm or confuse you, but this is normal. That extra ink allows Cricut to slightly cut inside the printed image without leaving white borders. This matters for things like stickers and stuff. Turning bleed off often will make the cuts worse, not better. So if you see that fuzzy outline, don't panic. It just means Print Then Cut is doing its job. Bleed is okay and good in this case. That said, something else that can happen is that you see bleed all over everything. You know it's not right. We're going to talk about that in just a minute, so don't worry. Something else that matters is calibration. Now, calibration is important. I also think it's a little misunderstood. You do not need to calibrate constantly. You want to calibrate when Cricut prompts you to, when your cuts are noticeably off after major updates, or when something suddenly changes. If your cuts are only slightly imperfect, recalibrating can sometimes make things worse. This isn't about perfection, it's about consistency. So to calibrate, you're going to go to your settings and look for the option to calibrate. So let me show you what that looks like right now in Cricut Design Space. Right now, as I'm recording this video in December 2025, you will find calibration under your settings. And I'm on the Mac, so mine are up here under settings. And then we go look under machines. So calibration is right here. And this is where you would do it if you need to do it. Now, a lot of times when it prompts you, it'll just take you right there. But if you need to calibrate, that's where it is. That said, I don't think that you need to calibrate as much as you might think you do. But you can just follow the on-screen directions to calibrate your machine. If you've ever calibrated your Cricut perfectly, and let me just show you what one looks like too, by the way, and your Print Then Cut is still off, this is one of the most confusing and frustrating Cricut problems. And I get you. This is what a calibration looks like. This is actually a successful calibration that I did right before our video today. It actually cuts your sheet for you, your calibration sheet, which it prints out for you so that you can see. And then it does several cuts. You tell it whether it's good or not good. And what you're looking for is a result like this. You see how that box has that black border around it? I want you to know it's not perfect. This is totally, however, good enough. We're off like by, I don't know, microns or something. It looks really good. So I don't typically have a lot of issues with Print Then Cut at all, in fact. And that's because I'm using the tips that I'm sharing with you. Of course, in the beginning, I had to figure it out, right? But if you have calibrated and you've got this perfect box and everything looks good, this can just be so frustrating, right? Because it feels like calibration should fix everything. But here is the key thing to understand. Calibration only fixes one very specific thing. It aligns your Cricut sensor to the black registration marks. And again, here is a sheet, our calibration sheet right here, right? That's it. It doesn't fix anything that might be going on with your printer. It doesn't fix anything going on with your lighting. It doesn't fix whether your paper moves. It doesn't fix image quality issues where your sensors are difficult to read. So it is absolutely possible and really very common for calibration to be perfect and cuts to still be off. I want everyone to hear this because it's important. The number one reason that you can have perfect calibration but it's still not printing right is printer scaling. If your printer is set to fit to page, scale to printable area, or anything other than 100% or actual size, your print is physically the wrong size. Even being off by 1 or 2% is enough to throw your cut off. Calibration cannot fix a print that was scaled incorrectly. And then, of course, another big factor is lighting. Cricut sensor is extremely sensitive to contrast. Bright overhead lights, sunlight, glare, glossy paper can all confuse your sensor. And that's why simply turning the lights off or putting a light on over your Cricut can sometimes magically fix Print Then Cut without any recalibrating at all. Another issue is paper movement. So if you put a sheet of paper on your mat, maybe a mat that isn't really clean, and it shifts even a little bit, then it can, just even a millimeter, it can cause noticeable cut drift, right? Make sure you're using a clean mat, make sure you use your brayer. And finally, calibration doesn't last forever. Firmware updates, temperature changes in your environment, moving your machine around, and normal wear can all cause your calibration to drift over time, and it is normal. So the big takeaway here is, if Print Then Cut is off after calibration, it usually means something outside the machine is causing it. It's not that your Cricut is broken, it's not that you failed calibration, it's something else. And once you understand that, I think Print Then Cut stops feeling mysterious and like this, oh, maybe it'll work today, maybe it won't. And it starts feeling more fixable. Okay, something else that can happen that I think confuses a lot of people, and we're gonna go to Cricut Design Space for this one. So here we have our calendar, and we have this layer, which is our backing layer, and we have our dates layer. And you might think that the simplest thing to do is just bring this on top of here, position it where you want, and then select both of your layers and click Attach. If we do that and we go to the Make screen, we get something that looks correct, but I want you to notice what it says it's going to do right over here. It says it's going to do Print Then Cut and Basic Cut. No, that's definitely not what we want. If you ever see anything other than Print Then Cut on a Print Then Cut project, you know you've got a problem. And the issue is typically that you didn't flatten. In fact, it almost always is. There's one more thing to it, but but that's the first thing to look for. So let's go cancel this. And we're going to come over here, and instead of attaching, we want to flatten. So we can even detach because it doesn't matter. We want to flatten, which is the button down here. And I will zoom in on that so you can see it better. Here we go. It's the button right here, this button. You want to flatten. So I'm going to go ahead and flatten it. Gives us a little tooltip too and tells us basically if you're doing print then cut, you want to flatten. So I'm going to go ahead and flatten it. And now when we click make, we see that it says print then cut only, and that's what we want. But yeah, that's really important to do. Now, that is unfortunately not all there is to it. That's all there is to it for this design, but if you're doing your own design, sometimes it doesn't work that way. Let's just back up a little bit, and let's just take this away and delete it entirely. And let's say you just want it to look like this. You just want it to like do a little calendar, and you want to just cut out where you see this border. And you think that if you switch it to print then cut right here, that you're going to get it. But in fact, what will happen is it's going to cut out every single letter, every single one, and it's going to cut out the J and the A and this line and this 2, and the inside of this is a 0 right here. And that's not what you want. So what you need to do is you need to put something behind it so it's solid. So if you wanted to do it like this and not use my tutorial, you would go to shapes. You'd pick a free shape that is about this, a similar shape to your actual shape. Let's bring this down here. Let's change its color to white up here. And I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, and I'm going to just change its orientation. So this is on top like this. There we go. And I'm going to just change it again a little bit. There we go. Now if I select these 2 layers, you see the 2 layers selected here, and click flatten, now it's going to actually cut out around, in a box around my calendar shape, and not cut every single individual letter and number and line. Okay, so a lot of people struggle with that. And if you see that, that's all that's going on there, right? So just switching it like that, either flattening it or putting in a solid shape behind your shape is typically what you need to fix that particular print then cut issue, with it's cutting out all the individual things, right? This shows up a lot when you're making stickers, right? So 'cause a lot of times people will like to just make their own, they'll just take an image and they'll put a circle around it, but the circle isn't necessarily solid, okay? So you just need to be sure you've got that background. And if you skip this step, it will cut every single layer separately, because maybe that's what you wanted. We're just giving our Cricut instructions on what to do. It really is actually very, very good at telling us at doing what we said it should do. Okay. All right. I think I have one more tip. Oh yes, low resolution warnings. So if you've ever uploaded an image into Cricut Design Space and you've seen a little scary message, it looks like a little warning box and it's like yellow and it says low resolution. This image will print poorly. For best results, make it smaller or use a new image with higher resolution. I want you to just take a deep breath and pause, because this warning causes way more stress than it deserves. First, this warning does not mean your project's going to fail. It might mean that it's a little bit more pixelated, or it might not. It's not even an error. It's simply Cricut saying, hey, this image might not print as sharply if you make it too big. And that's it. And here's why that happens. Every image has a resolution, which basically just means how many pixels are packed into it. When you upload a file like a PNG or a JPG, Cricut Design Space looks at its size and quality and compares that to how big you're scaling it on the canvas. If you stretch the image larger than it was designed for, and that's a little bit variable there, Cricut will give you that warning. Now here is the key thing most people don't realize. Low resolution only affects print quality. It does not typically affect cutting accuracy, unless you're like crazy off. You know, I'm just gonna say, I mean, but typically it's not, it's really just about your print quality. So if your image looks good on screen and you're printing it at a reasonable size, you can often ignore the warning completely. I'm gonna put a big underline under that. I personally ignore this warning all the time for my stickers, my labels, my tags, my small designs. What matters is this: zoom in on your image in design space. If the images look crisp enough and you don't see a lot of fuzzy pixels, you are usually fine. There are times when the warning matters. If you're making something large, like wall art, signs, big decals, and you see that pixelation when you zoom in, that's when your quality will suffer. And so what can you do in that case? Option one, you can make your design smaller, so not go with the big image. Option number two, you can start with a higher resolution image, and that usually means exporting larger files if you made them yourself. It might mean using a resizer, which can have variable results too. Downloading images that are meant for print, not meant for the web, that can help too. Typically, it's not that big of a deal. It really depends on what you're doing. If you designed your image in Canva, Photoshop, you can always export at the largest size possible, even if you plan to shrink it later, which is really, really, really typical. When you upload our designs, you always have to scale them down. Scaling down is always safe. It's scaling up that causes the problems. So just remember that warning is not a stop sign. Trust your eyes, zoom in, and if it looks good, it usually prints good. Now, to get the best quality on your prints, you do need to make sure you're using your system dialog print box, and you need to make sure you're changing quality to best or high, and make sure that you've got enough ink in your printer and it's not on low, okay? Now, what do you do if it's like telling you it's too big, right? So sometimes your print then cut project feels smaller than you expected. This is one of the most misunderstood things about print then cut on Cricut, because Cricut does not print the full page, right? So here we have our project. You can see, you know, it's smaller, but it's not like it's going to like go all the way to the edge. Cricut needs to add these sensor marks around your design. These black marks are how your machine knows exactly where to cut, and those marks take up space. And that means you're not cutting the full sheet of paper. Right, here it is again. These are our sensor marks. So even though you're printing on letter size or A4 paper, only the center area is usable for your design. The rest of the paper is reserved for your center marks, right? You can go a little bigger than this, by the way. This is just the size of my project. So if you're thinking, why can't I make this bigger and like fill the whole page, right? This is why. It's the sensor marks, and Cricut is protecting the sensor mark area so your cut stays accurate. The maximum print then cut size is smaller than your paper size, and that limit is fixed. So you can't override it, you can't print edge to edge, and that's by design. So what do you do if you need your print then cut design to be bigger? So you either need to design within the print then cut boundary from the start. So that means before you commit to a project, you want to toggle on print then cut early so that you can make sure your design, when it's done, is going to fit without getting the warning, okay? But if you need something larger, which is totally a thing, you do have some options. You can break your design into multiple sections. I have a tutorial on how to do that. It's called Larger Than That, right? You can switch to a larger sheet of paper. For example, look at how big this is, right? Or you can use a different workflow entirely, like using standard printing outside of Cricut Design Space and cut it with scissors or a craft knife. Now, is anyone curious how I got this big sheet? Does anybody know? Look at the size of this calendar. So all I did was I changed my size to 11 by 17, and then I used my Epson 15000 to print an 11 by 17. That's it. I do want to note that since I scaled up, and I just told you that scaling up can be a problem, I want you to take a look at the quality of the print. What do you think? Is that good enough? Because I think it is. And I scaled up. I still got the warning though. I got the warning even when it was at this size, right here. This small size is still giving me that warning. It looks great scaled up. Now it's not as vibrant because this is not such a nice photo paper as this is, but still pretty good, don't you think? I think so. So if you've ever been really frustrated by your size and you have a printer that can print bigger, and almost all printers can at least do legal size, get yourself some legal size paper and do at least legal size. And if you can go bigger, because then you can get these massive print then cuts. All right, for my last print then cut fix. This one is perhaps more controversial. Sometimes when things don't work the way that we expect, it's easy to assume the tool is broken or the technology is failing us. And while that does happen, in my experience, it's often us, not the tech. I think we are incredibly fortunate to live in a time where we can do things like this right from our homes. This is not nothing. When I get stuck, I sometimes think about how astonished our ancestors would be at what we're able to do today from our own homes with tools like these. And I truly believe that they would have approached this kind of challenge with determination and curiosity, not immediate discouragement. These machines are powerful, but they do require patience, practice, and persistence. Crafting has always involved learning curves, making things. We gotta get over this. We gotta figure it out. The difference is now that instead of learning how to mix inks or sharpen blades, we're learning lighting and calibration and file setup. It's still craftsmanship, just in modern form. Sometimes the thing we need to fix is our mindset about how we approach our problems and not just give up. Like I did with the issues that I was just having, right? I got to stick with it. So that's just a little tough love from me, because I know this is going to help someone out there keep at it and solve their problem. And if that's you, I hope you're going to let me know. I love hearing from you, especially when I helped you fix something. Because, and I want you to hear this, you are capable of doing this, and this is worth learning. All right, so let's recap, print then cut, and set realistic expectations for ourselves. Yes, print then cut has some limitations. Lighting matters, paper matters, print quality matters. There's margins to consider, print quality, as we scale up. Even just the smallest shifts can make a difference, right? Designing with a little breathing room makes print then cut far more reliable, I've found. Success comes from designing with our tools, not against them. So before you hit make next time, ask yourself, is my lighting controlled? Is my paper matte, or is it glossy and shiny? Is bleed turned on so that I don't have that white edge? Does my design have the proper margins? And if you can say yes to those things, your chances of success go way up. So if print then cut has made you frustrated or defeated, I want you to hear this. You are not bad at crafting. Your machine probably isn't broken. Print then cut is powerful but sensitive. And once you understand what it's looking for, it becomes predictable. And when something goes wrong, you'll know why. And it's that confidence that changes everything. Crafting should feel creative and satisfying, not stressful. However, it still does, and that's reality. But when just knowing that we can fix that helps us stay calm and work through our problems. Meg, It's a World says, should I print then cut for sublimation? That's another controversial question. Some people will say it's fine, some people will say it's not. So here's what I think. Cricut Design Space isn't designed for sublimation, but there's a lot of assets inside there, and a lot of people just are really comfortable in Design Space. If you are okay with the fact that it's going to have sensor marks around, and that I have observed that the quality changes a bit when you print from Design Space. For example, I think that the highest resolution it prints is 150 dpi, not 300 dpi. But the thing is, when it comes to sublimation, it doesn't matter. So you can kind of just like let that one go. But sometimes I have noticed the color sometimes shift just a little bit. Sometimes like the color will change. Basically, it has to do with your printer drivers. It's whatever. It's way more complicated than we need to get into today. You are welcome to print your sublimation from Design Space if you are okay with how you have to have your sensor marks in there and you have to cut them out before you press. That said, I typically don't. I typically do my sublimation from Google Docs, or I print directly from Photoshop. I teach most people to use Google Docs for sublimation instead. You get to do you. You get to do what works for you. I'm not going to prescribe it for you. So that's really the only thing. So you can if you want to. Just know that you are going to get a bigger print if you print from like Google Docs typically. Melissa says, could you also do print and cut for the colors and then pen draw for the days to make it bigger? You can do the print and then cut and then use the pen. And I think in our other tutorial that we did do that, as I recall. It will print and then it will cut and then it will draw. You'll have to make sure you switch your days, your calendar part with the numbers to draw, and then you have to attach it to your back layer. That said, I don't really know that there's any point if you're using a printer. There's not. I mean, if you just like the way that the pen draws, go for it, but it will take longer. And it will use up your pen, and you're printing already. So if it were me, I would just print the numbers, but you can. If you want to practice with it or something, or you just like pen. Joyce says, can you use smaller photo paper? You can use smaller photo paper so long as it's going to work. It's got to work in your printer, but it also has to work for Cricut Design Space. So it has to match your screen, right? And I'm trying to think, I'm going to go in there and look right now to see what the smallest it is. The smallest material size is really only 8.3 by 11.7 inches. So not really. You can't really use a smaller one because Cricut doesn't have a setting to go any smaller than, this is A4, right? So yeah, so not really. So you're going to want to use there might be some kind of crazy workaround, but we're not going to get into that today. So what matters is that your Cricut Design Space screen is matching what you printed, okay? Because when you go to put it into your Cricut, it's got to find the sensors and everything. With the Cricut Read the Cuts, if you put the design at the bottom of the mat and cut it out. Cricut's help documents specifically say to put your project in the upper left corner of your machine because it's going to start looking there for its sensor marks. So you would not want to put your design in the bottom of the mat and cut it out from there. You can move your design on your page, right? So long as you're putting your design in the upper corner of your mat, right? It needs to go in the upper corner of your mat. The normal starting point, okay? That's really important. Can I make a check sheet or trouble sheet on this? Ellie asked that. That is a great idea. And I wanted to do that. I just ran out of time today to do that. But I've actually been thinking about, let me know what you think of this idea. I've been thinking about doing a book on Cricut troubleshooting. It's all about troubleshooting various issues. So it would be full of cheat sheets on troubleshooting material settings and troubleshooting print then cut and troubleshooting why is my machine not turning on and why is it not scoring right? All of the things, or why is the blade in there but it's not cutting, right? All of it. Would you be interested in a whole ebook or, Amazon print on demand book on troubleshooting your Cricut? Let me know in the chat and I'll come back and read it later to see what you think. It's one of my ideas for 2026. I'm actually hoping to do a bunch more books in 2026, so don't be surprised by this. Yes? Oh, I can see your comments now. You would love that? Awesome. Thank you for letting me know. So I think watch for that, because that's going to be better than any like Google Doc troubleshooting thing I make for you today, which is what I would do today. It's just kind of like, that's actually what I started doing. It was pretty simple, but in a book, it's going to probably have a nice little flow chart and be easy to follow and be like a one page. That would be my goal. I really like one page things because it's like at a glance. So more work goes into it, but none of my ebooks cost very much. They're really, really affordable. All right, Leslie says, could you use the can of air duster to clean the sensor? So Cricut says not to do it. And I think the reason that they say that is because if you blow that air compressor could be really strong. And I think that sometimes you could actually damage the sensor cover. And if that sensor cover pops off, the little black thing I showed you, if it pops off, you will have problems with your Print Then Cut. If it's under warranty, be sure to contact Cricut about that. If you're handy, you might be able to put it back on, but you don't want that to happen. With the little black thing, it decreases the, I don't know what it's doing, but it's important. I know that, it's important. Danye says, if you put the solid shape behind what you want to print then cut, do you need to attach it first rather than flatten? If you put the solid shape behind it, you can just you have to do flatten, right? You have to flatten the two. If you only attach, it is going to still cut. It's not going to, and it's going to cut out of your printed part. So you need to flatten everything when you put that shape behind it. And I know that because I was just playing around earlier before our workshop started to make sure that, I was not going to mislead you. It's very important. I always try to make sure that I'm not going to be like leading you down the primrose path on something. Things change quickly. So let me just go back, in fact, to Cricut Design Space so I can show you what I'm talking about. So let's unflatten this. You can see everything I'm showing you right now. Yes? Yes. All right, so here we've got our two layers. Here's our shape, and here is our, let's go all the way back. So it's an SVG again. There we go. Is it? Nope, it's still on Print Then Cut. We need to go back to what it would be like. There we go, basic cut. So this is the way it will show up when you upload it, and then we add a rectangle in. Right, this is the shape we're putting behind it, so it's going to cut as a solid. That's what we want. So I'm going to change that to white, and then I'm going to move it behind and just make it a little bit bigger. All right, so if I were to just attach these two right now, and then go to make, well, first of all, you can see right away it's not going to work out. You have and I'm going to zoom in on this. I want you to see the issue that we've got going on here. Right here. Well, it's doing a basic cut, but it's going to cut it should cut each of these letters individually. Yes, you can see it when we zoom in. You see how it's got this outline? Each of these black lines is basically where it's going to cut. So if you zoom in, you can see that this isn't right? It's not going to do that. So let's zoom out so I can show you the right way again. All right, so we cancel this and we want to detach it, and let's actually undo it. So we just go all the way back. There we go. We want it to look like this. So now we select both the layers and instead we do a flatten. So you see how there's no bubble letters, right? Sometimes I think people will get the bubble letters, even though they have done it correctly because they didn't go back all the way. Because when you do that, whatever. So go far enough back when you've made a mistake to start from the proper point again. All right, so now when we go to make, and I will zoom in on this again so you can see. So do you see how we don't have any bubble lighters now? And it's only going to cut around this black box. And everything in here is going to print out and be beautiful. Okay? All right. Were there any more questions? Yes. Michelle says, can you add highlighting color circles to numbers for holidays or birthdays? Yes, you can. Here is an example, right? So we've got a circle, we've got basically a sun on August 26th, right? So this is a good example of how a notation, and this is printed on here, right? It's not drawn or anything. You could, of course, draw on it if you want to. But yes, so you can do this when you go to print it. You'll just need to set it up that way in Cricut Design Space and then flatten, right? And then just to show you this awesome calendar. So this is our Print Then Cut calendar, design number 793. And as you move through it, the picture changes, right? Isn't this cute? So I think this is a really fun calendar. And you can absolutely do this with Print Then Cut. And it's really cute. There's another variation of it with cute little woodland animals right here. That cute little deer and the little chipmunk and the little bunny. And as you move through the year, you see them differently. Isn't that cute? Right. So project 493. Tiff Chan says, you used a regular inkjet printer, correct? Yes, this is a regular inkjet printer using standard inkjet ink, just like the Epson inkjet, the Epson ink that's in here, but you know. And I think I have everyone's Print Then Cut questions. So thank you so much for joining me and working through Print Then Cut with me. I hope that this helps you and that you come back and revisit it if you need to figure out what might be going on. But I really think a lot of this is mindset. And so it's both information and mindset. Probably anything can be fixed. Anything can be fixed with some patience and changing your environment. Your lighting, your calibration, your print settings, even your design can all make a difference. If you have more questions, I encourage you to leave them here under the video. We read all of our comments and would be happy to answer them. Or come on over to our Cricut Crafters group at jennifermaker.com/CricutCrafters. And that's it for today. Until next time, this is Jennifer Maker reminding you to craft a life you love.